Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. That's right, I changed it to .dev now. So if you want to get to my website, it is now AlexMercedCoder.dev. Okay, to find all the things. Okay, and hopefully that all loads up right, but I'll confirm that a little bit later. Okay. Anyways, basically what we'll do today is just kind of go over a very fundamentals of programming. In particular, we're going to be doing this in JavaScript, but particularly programming. So again, I'm here. If you're new to programming, I am using Visual Studio Code. So I just opened Visual Studio Code. And generally a good way to do it is you want to open it to an empty folder. So just click on like open folder and then just open up an empty folder on your computer. Do make sure that you have Node installed. So you would go to like nodejs.org. Okay, so you'll go here and then I would probably download the LTS version, the 16. Usually I tell people always download the current, but the 18, there are some fairly significant changes that cause little issues with certain things as you get more advanced. That should probably be worked out by the next LTS. LTS stands for long-term support. So it's like, you're good to use this for a long time. Okay, so I would get that installed. Now, once you have that installed, here in Visual Studio Code, which you would download over there by going to code.visualstudio.com. Okay, and there you can download Visual Studio Code. Okay, it'll detect your operating system. You should be good to go. So long as you got these two things, we're good to go. Okay, and just so you can understand what these two things are, Visual Studio Code is a editor, so it allows you to edit text files, but it's particularly designed for programming. So in the sense that it knows like what programming looks like and will highlight the colors and give you all sorts of really nice features to make it a lot easier to code. Okay, a lot more visually stimulating than just opening up like Notepad and editing some text. Node.js specifically is something we're going to install on our computer so we can run JavaScript files. It'll read the code in the JavaScript file and actually like output the result of the code. So without Node, we can't run our JavaScript files. There are other things like Bun and Deno that can do the same thing, but Node is kind of the standard. It's the most popular one. These are referred to as JavaScript runtimes in the sense that they run JavaScript code. Okay. So if you have these two things installed, we're good. So now a cool thing about Visual Studio Code, okay, is that you can open up the terminal. Now this is not something that's built, this is not something that's like a code thing, it's your computer thing. So your computer has what's referred to as a command line. Okay, I can open up separately. So like, I could open up terminal. I'm on a Linux machine, so I can open up terminal by just clicking on a terminal emulator. Same thing if you're on Mac. And on both those operating systems, that is a bash shell. That's just a language that you would use to talk to your computer. Because that's what a terminal is. It's essentially a way to talk to your computer via text instead of clicking on icons on a graphical user interface. But instead of me having to open up this separate window, I can open it up directly from Visual Studio Code, which is super convenient. I just click on terminal, create a new terminal. And then I can enter in commands. And the other really nice thing about Visual Studio Code is that if I had opened up Visual Studio Code to a particular folder, because again, I click this open folder thing here, when I open up the terminal, it's going to open it up automatically in that folder. Okay, so you see I'm already in the folder that I created, this empty folder. Okay, so just so you can see like what I'm doing, my setup here. Okay, I'm going to close this. Okay, so essentially those are sort of the first two steps. Okay, and again, the focus here is just going to be understanding sort of the role of programmatic thinking, the role of like variables. So what we're going to do is I'm going to make a new file. We'll call this var.js. Okay, it doesn't really matter what the file name is. And just to kind of show you how this works, we're going to do like your most basic JavaScript command. So there's this object called the console. This console object represents technically the terminal. Okay, so the idea is I want to log text to this terminal. So there's a function, and generally when you have an object in JavaScript, so there's these objects that are built in. As you get more advanced, you can learn to build your own objects. But built into the JavaScript language is the console. And that console object has a function called log, which just what it does, it'll print text to the console. Okay, so I have to, in quotation marks, I'm going to give it, in the parentheses, I can give it which text I want it to print to the console. So I'm going to just say hello world. Okay, that's generally what you do, always your first thing you do when you are programming. So now if I go to the terminal, and again, I have to make sure that my terminal is in the right folder. So it's in the same folder that I'm working out of. That's what makes using Visual Studio Code really convenient, because again, it's going to automatically open terminal to the folder you're working in, which makes life a lot easier. You can always double check by doing pwd. That actually prints whatever folder the terminal is currently set to. Okay? And then if you need to change the folder, you can always just type in cd and then the name of the folder. Okay, but I have other videos. Just look up Intro to Bash or Intro to Bash Alex Merced on YouTube, and you can find my videos where I go much more in depth about like your terminal commands. Okay, cool. Now, bottom line here, if we want to run this JavaScript file, I'm going to type in no, and you got to make sure it's saved. Okay, so I have autosave on. So you can see here I have autosave on. If you see like a white dot right here, that means the file is not saved. If the file is not saved, it's not going to run anything. Okay, so in case the code doesn't work, double check that your file is saved. Okay, but I'm going to type in node. Node is the command. So basically in Bash, you generally, the way the terminal knows which software you're running is by like the command name. So in this case, when I run the node command, it knows to run the node software. And then I do space, and the next thing I'm telling it is which file to run. Okay, so I'm telling it to run var.js, which is going to assume that there's a file called var.js in the folder that the terminal is currently set to. Okay, so that file would have to be in that folder for me to run it like this. So I hit node var.js, and you see it did exactly what the code says. It logged to the console the words hello world. Okay, simple as that. Okay, that is the basics of just how you run a JavaScript file. Now we can begin talking about like programmatic concepts. The main programmatic concept I want to get across in this video, okay, is variables. Okay, so a variable in any programming language is just a place to store information in a sense. Okay, so for example, okay, what I can do is I can declare a variable. So the simplest way to declare a variable in JavaScript is to use the word let. Like there's a lot more complexities to it, but I'm gonna keep it simple today. We're just gonna use the word let. And what you do is you then declare a name for the variable. So we'll just say like let x and let y. Okay? So those are my two variables. Okay? Now what I'm going to want to do, and you can see like I have these little like messages. I have this like extension. In Visual Studio Code, you can install different extensions, which are done through here, and they can offer new functionality. So this particular extension is Error Lens, if you want those kind of messages. I would probably not install Error Lens until you got a decent understanding of the basics, because most of the times these error messages are good, but sometimes they can give you false flags, and you kind of want to have a little bit of a better understanding, so that way like you know when it's giving you a non-error, like in a sense like, oh, it thinks there's an error but there isn't. Okay, but I've declared these two variables. So let's say I don't know what the value of x is. I don't know what the value of y is. Okay, so for this first example, we'll just give it a value. So now that I've created a variable, I can actually store information in there. So I can be like x equals 5, y equals 7. Okay, and then I can do operations. I can actually do like express things with that, and that's referred to as an expression. So what we'll do is we'll log to the console the result of the following expression, x plus y. Okay, and essentially when I write x plus y, it's going to use whatever values inside of x, which is 5, and it's going to use whatever values inside of y, which is 7. So it's going to run this expression. An expression is anything in code that comes back to you with one value. Okay, so the expression of x plus y is going to come back with something. It's going to come back with a number, because 5 plus 7 is going to give me 12. Okay, so essentially what this code will do is going to create two little places where I can store information. We're going to store information in there, and then we're going to do stuff with it. Okay, and that's what this code is doing. Okay, so now if I run the code, so I go over here, type in node var.js, and what does it do? It logs 12, the result of 5 plus 7. And you're probably thinking, like, why did I go through all that trouble? Wouldn't it have been easier for me to just say console.log 5 plus 7? Why did I need to store it in a variable? Because I could do that. I could just say, hey, 5 plus 7. And that's going to give me the same result. It's going to run that expression, 5 plus 7, and print out the result. The reason is because in most software, you don't know what the numbers are. Okay, so I may not know what, X and Y are. Maybe the user is going to give it to me. So maybe I'm writing a script that just adds two numbers. Okay, so whatever those two numbers are, I don't know what they're going to be. It's going to be X plus Y. Okay, so a cool thing you can do with your Node scripts is I could do something like this. I could be like node var.js, and I could have done like 8, 8. So see, I'm passing in these extra pieces of information. These can be called command line arguments. So they're essentially, I'm passing information to my code from the command line. In Node, in order for me to get a command line argument, I would do this. So I would say, hey, X equals, and it would technically be process. Process is another object that is built into JavaScript, specifically into Node. Okay, because again, there's different versions. There's like Node, there's Bun, there's Deno. JavaScript in each of those three scenarios works slightly different. And then there's the browser, and JavaScript works slightly different there. So you always got to think about, where is my JavaScript running when you're running specifically JavaScript? And then other languages have their own issues you have to think about. But this process object that works when you're using Node, okay? So again, I'm using the Node command. That's how you know I'm using Node. Inside of there, there's a collection of values called argv. It really means the argument vector. That's what argv stands for. And a vector is another word for an array, meaning a collection of values. Okay, so in this collection of values, argv, okay, there is going to be all our command line arguments, so 8 and 8. Just a weird quirk in Node, the first two, okay, because technically the first one would be 0, right? Okay, so the first thing in argv would be 0, the second thing would be 1, the third thing would be 2. Generally, the first and the second thing are you really don't want. They're just things that are automatically figured out by Node. Don't worry about it. Like if you really want to just see what it looks like just so we can see what argv comes out with. So if I do console.log, let's just say argv, so that way there's a label, and then we'll say, then we'll actually print out arg process.argv. So that way we're printing to the console, and you can see the contents of this. So I'm going to comment this out right now. So to comment this out, I'm going to do control // So it's control / at the same time, and I can comment out that code. When your code is commented out like this, it means that it will be ignored. Okay, I just want to ignore it for the moment. And this is the kind of things that make using Visual Studio Code a lot easier, because I can comment out code like this and like that. Okay, so I am going to run this code with the 2 8s. And you see this is the collection of values inside argv. Okay, so you see these first two values I don't need. I don't really care about these two values. They're just like, hey, where is the Node program? Like, where is the Node software? And what is the file that I'm running? Don't need those, don't care. What I do care is about all the arguments coming after, so 8 and 8. But notice that they're strings, in the sense that it's not the number 8, it's like 8 as characters, like a sentence, being treated like it's text. So we can tell because there's the 2 quotation marks around it. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to save whatever numbers are passed in into X and Y. So I have these variables, and I would like to save whatever numbers the user gives me inside of them. Okay, so let's change this. Okay, and then I'm going to comment this out now. So we're going to say that X equals the third number inside argv. Again, that's this. And then Y equals process.argv3. And this is where you start really seeing the value of variables. Because see, I can write this code even though I don't know what numbers are going to be in there. Okay? I just know, I'm assuming that when someone uses this, they're going to give me 2 numbers, and I know that the first number should be here and the second number should be there, and those numbers I want to save inside X and Y. Okay, so the idea is that you can express what you're trying to do without knowing what it is. And that's the beauty of like using variables and programmatic thinking. The idea is thinking, okay, there's certain things I don't know, but how can I express what I want to happen when I do know them? Okay, so it's definitely like a different way of thinking that takes time to develop and takes practice, but essentially that's what we're doing. So now what's going to happen is when I run this code, it's going to create the two variables. It's then going to go look inside the argv list of items and grab the two right things and store them inside the variables, and then I'm going to print out the result. So now watch what happens when I run this code. Wait a second, 8 plus 8 isn't 88. Well, here's the thing. Remember what I mentioned earlier? That, see, it treats them like strings. Anything you pass in through the command line argument gets treated as text. So all I did was to add the text of 8 to the text of 8. So if you add two strings to blotches of text, you're going to get 88, then 8. So what I need to do is I need to make sure, because what happens is that every variable, the actual data has a particular data type, meaning it's a it could be a string, which is text like letters, or it could be a number, okay, which could be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what I want to do is change these two into a number. So the simplest way to do it is that I can actually use the word number like this, and then I just wrap this like a function. So basically, whenever I use this function number, and I put, and the way you use a function is you put parentheses after it, whatever I put in the parentheses will be converted into a number. Okay, so if I do that, it's going to take whatever, this is technically referred to as a number constructor. The terminology is not that important right now, but I can use this number function to turn it into a number. Okay, so now what's going to happen, let's see the difference. And see, now this time I get 16, and notice how, at least on my terminal, the 16 comes up as yellow, because on my prompt, on my terminal with the software I have installed, whenever it's a number, it's going to show yellow, and when it's text, it'll show up as like white. So it's another way you can kind of tell like, what are you printing? But you can see here, this process. So basically what I did is, again, we created two variables. I grabbed the data from the argv collection of information that should have the two things that we posted over here. I made sure I converted that text into a number and saved the result in X. Okay, so basically I'm saying X equals the result of this. Okay, and generally everything always starts from the inside out. So technically the first thing that's going to happen is we're going to retrieve the string of 8 from argv, and then that string of 8 is passed to number, which takes the string and converts it, and then technically the result of that, which is the number 8, gets saved in X. And then we do the same thing in the next letter. So now the cool thing is I can use any two numbers now. So I can be like 9 and 20, 29. Node var.js, 9 and 9, 18. So you can see here now I've just created a script that I can use to add two numbers. Now this is probably a little bit more out of the way to add two numbers, but imagine like you have like a particular like calculation you want to run regularly, and you could write a script like this, just like we just did, that runs a calculation, and you can just run the file, pass it the numbers you need, and it can run those calculations for you. Maybe you're doing like monthly budgeting, or you're trying to calculate different versions of your BMI or something like that. And that's the beauty of programmatic thinking. You can imagine, okay, what are the inputs? What are the information that I expect to be coming in? And those can be represented by a variable like X and Y. And then I can try to then express the steps that I want to happen, even though I don't know the numbers. I can express that I know, okay, I want the user to give me two numbers. I know I'm getting them from argv, so they're going to be a string, so I want to convert them into a number. I get the two numbers, save them in a variable, and I want to add them together. I don't know what the two numbers are, but I know that's what I want to do with them. And that's where you start developing your programmatic thinking. You don't focus on what you don't know, you focus on what you can assume about what you don't know. In the sense, like, I know what I expect, that what I want to get two numbers, but to get the result I want, if I have X and Y, these are the things I need to do step by step. Okay, so that's hopefully this kind of helps shine a light a little bit on how to start building that process. Again, it's not something that happens overnight. It's just a lot of practice of how to kind of develop that sort of thought process of thinking about the problem, but not being held back by what you don't know, but instead of trying to figure out a way to express what you do know around what you don't know. And generally, variables end up filling the spots of the things you don't know yet. Okay, and that's the role of variables. So hopefully you guys enjoy that. My name is Alex Merced. You guys can follow me on Twitter at AlexMercedCoder. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, so hit that like, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you all later. Have a great day and enjoy.